Have you ever worn something so bad, so cringe, that you hope nobody ever finds the photo? Maybe it was glittery jeans, a weird haircut, or an outfit that you once thought looked cool, until time and your own memory betrayed you. We all have embarrassing fashion choices in our past. We laugh at them now. We roll our eyes, shake our heads and say, "What was I thinking?" But in the past, fashion wasn't just uncomfortable or embarrassing. It wasn't just funny. In the past, fashion was dangerous. And sometimes, fashion was deadly. People didn't just suffer for beauty, they burned for it. They drowned because of it. They tripped, fell, and even died in the name of looking good. Let's begin with one of the most restrictive and deadly skirts ever designed. In the early 1900s, women were starting to gain power. They were walking the streets more freely, riding bicycles, joining social clubs, working jobs, and speaking up. Women were becoming more independent. And then fashion stepped in with the hobble skirt. The hobble skirt came into style between 1908 and 1914. It was long and narrow, tight around the ankles, and made it nearly impossible to walk normally. The name hobble wasn't a joke. It described exactly what the skirt did. It forced women to take tiny steps, barely able to move. Women shuffled along like toddlers or penguins. It was slow, awkward, and exhausting. It was also suspicious. Why did this style show up just as women were becoming more active in society? Was it just a coincidence? Or was fashion being used as a weapon to hold women back? To slow them down? To remind them of their place? Some historians believe it was no accident. Others say it was just a weird style, but one thing is certain, these skirts were incredibly dangerous. To prevent their skirts from ripping while walking, some women tied their knees together under the fabric. Others wore skirts with hidden pleats that allowed for slightly more movement. Designers tried to fix the problem, but the truth remained. These skirts were walking traps. In 1910, a woman wearing a hobble skirt was at a racetrack in France. A horse broke loose. People ran. She couldn't. Her skirt was too tight. She was trampled and killed. In 1911, another woman tripped while walking across a bridge over the Erie Canal. Her tight skirt made her lose balance. She fell over the railing and drowned. These skirts were so difficult to walk in that cities had to adjust. Some cable cars added low steps, just 6 inches high, so women in hobble skirts could climb on board. These were called hobble skirt cars. Imagine that, public transport redesigned because of a skirt. Despite the risks, women kept wearing them. Fashionable women didn't want to be left behind. Even as men laughed and mocked the trend, newspapers filled with cartoons calling them speed limit skirts. Some women fought back by holding hobble skirt races just to show they could still have fun. But the skirts didn't disappear because they were dangerous. They were only replaced when something even more ridiculous came into style. Now, let's step even further back in time, into the medieval era, where shoes became weapons of pride, status, and pure stupidity. In the Middle Ages, men began wearing Crackoff shoes, also called poulens. These shoes had ridiculously long pointed toes. Some toes were 2 inches long. Some were 5, some were over 20 inches long, nearly 2 feet of leather sticking straight out from your foot. It sounds like a joke, but people wore them seriously, and they wore them proudly. These shoes started with nobles in Poland and then spread across Europe. The idea was simple. If you could afford to wear shoes that made walking difficult, then you were clearly wealthy. You didn't need to work, you didn't need to move fast. You could glide through life in total discomfort, and that was considered fashionable. The toes were often stuffed with moss or hay to keep their shape. Some were so long they had to be attached to the wearer's knee with a chain. Yes, a literal gold or silver chain running from your shoe to your leg, just to keep them from flopping. The longer your shoe, the higher your social rank. That was the rule. Nanga. But not everyone was impressed. In 1368, King Charles V of France banned them. Men wearing these shoes couldn't kneel properly during prayer. That's right. These shoes were so ridiculous, they were blocking people from worshipping. In England, King Edward IV was even more direct. People had started to believe that the length of a man's shoe said something about the length of his manhood. So the king passed a law. No shoe tip could be longer than 2 inches. That's it. Enough was enough. But the trend didn't die right away. The shoes hung on for decades, proving once again that when fashion becomes a symbol of power, reason goes out the window. Let's move now to the most famous fashion disaster of the Tudor era, the ruff. In the 1500s, a small frill around the neck began to grow, With the help of starch and wire, that little ruffle turned into a full-blown neck donut. Some ruffs stuck out 9 inches from the neck. They were stiff, they were uncomfortable, and they were everywhere. The ruff became a symbol of elegance, class, and high society. It forced people to hold their heads high and their backs straight. It made even simple movements feel royal, but it also made eating nearly impossible. Imagine trying to drink soup with a giant wheel of fabric circling your head. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Queen Elizabeth I loved ruffs. She wore them in nearly all her portraits. She even banned blue ruffs just because Scotland's flag was blue. Yes, she banned a colour. Wearing a ruff meant you had money, you had power, you could afford to be uncomfortable, you could suffer for fashion. That was the message, and people embraced it. They wore these uncomfortable collars proudly, even though they made daily life harder. Eventually, ruffs fell out of fashion. People got tired of the stiffness and the inconvenience. Society moved on, but the memory of those giant collars lives on in every portrait from the Tudor age. Now comes the most tragic and horrifying trend of all, the crinoline. In the mid-1800s, women's fashion demanded wide, bell-shaped skirts. To achieve this shape, women wore crinolines, huge cages made from metal, wood, or whalebone. These cages held up layers of fabric and gave dresses a round, elegant shape. At their widest, crinolines could stretch 18 feet across. That's wider than some modern cars. Walking through doorways became a challenge. Sitting down was a puzzle. Falling over, a complete disaster. If a woman fell while wearing a crinoline, she often needed help just to stand up again. But the real danger was fire. These dresses were made of light, delicate, highly flammable fabric. Because the skirts were so wide, women often didn't notice when the hem brushed against a candle, stove, or fireplace. When the fabric caught fire, it went up in flames instantly. The cage underneath trapped the woman inside. She couldn't remove it fast enough. She couldn't escape. Florence Nightingale estimated that at least 630 women died this way. Some reports say the number was over 3,000. That's thousands of women who were burned alive, just because they wanted to look beautiful. And these weren't just upper-class women. Factory workers, servants and housewives wore crinolines too. Fashion was for everyone, and so was the danger. Eventually the crinoline was replaced by the bustle, a smaller, more practical style. But for thousands of women, it was too late. The damage had been done. So what can we learn from all this? Fashion has always been about more than clothes. It's about power, it's about status, it's about identity. But it's also about pressure, the pressure to fit in, the pressure to impress, the pressure to be beautiful, even if it hurts. Throughout history, people have suffered for style. They've stumbled, they've burned, they've drowned, they've sacrificed comfort, and in some cases, they've sacrificed their lives. So the next time you complain about tight jeans or annoying heels, remember, at least your clothes won't kill you. Probably. Thank you for watching.